Welcome back to another episode of the Driven Exchange podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Send Now. It's the email deliverability suite of the future, and it's what we use at our company to get 10,000 cold outbound emails out every single month without fail, whilst keeping our health in check. I really want to say thank you for the support, the appreciation, and the feedback about these episodes. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy today's episode.
Welcome. Let's start. So, guys, another attempt at another show of the Red Line Hustle podcast. We are at episode 16. I got Kevin Love on the show. We're all-time friends. I've known him since high school, middle school, actually. And Kevin has gone on to do a number of very, very interesting things in the B2B world, including an exit, I think. You've raised capital and you've been part of some huge names. So, Kevin, I'm going to hand over the intro to you. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? And give people a little flavor of who you are.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much flavor we can possibly drive on a Monday morning here in the States, but I'll give it my best attempt. Yeah. So as Shane mentioned, we met in high school freshman year, which is kind of crazy to think about. That was back in 2001, so going on 2 decades. But yeah, it's been quite a journey. I started my career in finance, like 90% of the people in our neighborhood, but quickly realized that it was pretty unfulfilling, and went out to California in 2016, founded my first company. As Shane alluded to, we did raise some capital for that company, a good amount, actually around 40 million, which kind of seems a bit extreme, but
that's
we were in
huge.
Yeah, it's huge. It was a moment in time. We were in the legal cannabis space, out of all things. So we opened dispensaries, cultivation, production facilities. It was a very cash-intensive industry to operate in. So capital really was the driving force of everything we did. And then after we exited that organization, I kind of was looking for something that was less capital intensive, but something you can monetize, pretty efficiently on. And, the whole SaaS boom, we were kind of in the midst of it a couple of years ago. A lot of MarTech companies coming to market. So being my current co-founder of Flytech, which is actually, we've kind of migrated more into what you do, Shane, and we haven't caught up in a while, but we've introduced some tech in the marketplace that supports B2B organizations. Essentially, it's prospect tracking through an inbound motion. So we're actually having the ability to determine who's landing on a website and what their intent level is of actually conducting business with B2B organizations. So there's some probabilistic capabilities of what we do, but then also like exact science. And a lot of that has evolved out of our experience, which are in between the cannabis company and what we're currently doing. We had another company that was all in like the privacy space. So in Europe, it's GDPR. In the United States, it's CCPA. So did venture capital, had a big bet basically for privacy regulations and how they're evolving in the United States. And then we realized that there was a couple of gaps there where we could efficiently provide data about folks that are coming onto our clients' websites and provide that information to their sales team for a more meaningful follow-up. So kind of jumped across the board in my startup experience so far. Being in the legalized cannabis space, then coming into the privacy space, and then taking our knowledge in that space and applying it to B2B services, essentially. So, hopefully that hit the mark and gave you enough context as to who I am, but happy to dive deeper in anything that you find interesting for your audience.
I think that's very, very interesting. So the first company, I think, is a given. That's incredible. How long did it take you to raise 40 million? For those that want to raise money.
Yeah, that was a quick process. And I think a lot of it has to do with timing and just market demand, right? So back in 2016, cannabis kind of hit this like green rush, hockey stick growth
Yeah.
where let me back up a little bit. The interesting thing about the market at that moment in time in the United States is that we were still going through legalization. So in Canada, they actually had a lot of public companies that were in the cannabis market. But for American based investors that wanted to invest kind of on the ground floor of America, or our opportunity here in America, they all had to do private placement, right? So there is way more money than placement available in the marketplace. So to go out and raise 10, 15, 20, even 40 million, I'm not going to say it was an easy task, but the demand level was so high where people just were throwing money at the industry. So when you talk about like normalized markets, raising capital is more of a dog and pony show. You have to have a good deck. You have to have a good execution strategy. You have to have a great leadership team. When it came to cannabis in 2016, if you had a license, you were raising $5 million on the license. So it was a little bit of a different market than kind of what a traditional startup would experience. So I don't think it's a like for like comparison, but I would say we raised that capital over the course of about 2 years, but in different tranches based upon what our objectives were as an organization and what we're growing. But we were able to pretty much bring in capital as quickly as we're basically going live requesting capital in the market. So it was an unprecedented time with a lot of interest, a lot of demand. So the capital raising process was just super accelerated.
So one thing is actually has been on my mind. When you get that much money, the 40 million, I don't know how much the investors want back, but I'm sure if you break even, that's nothing exciting. So is it usually a 2x, 3x? That's question one. And number two, if you're able to answer it, were you able to pay the investors back and still win on top?
Yeah, so pretty loaded question there, and I'll do the best to explain. So when you think about return ratios, the early investors had the highest return expectations, right? Because they're pretty much investing in a company that had a license but didn't necessarily have, the infrastructure or the retail locations. Like the capital that was coming in was intended to build out basically business, right? Because
Yeah.
this whole industry was predicated on who could get a license, right? And we were partnered with some really big names in the markets that we serve that were, politically influential and were able to go through the
Yeah.
licensing process.
Yep.
So, it's typical of like the United States. Everything's like, a backroom deal here. But what started happening, which is kind of like the shame of it all, is municipalities started over licensing because they were looking at all the revenue that was coming in from releasing licensing and basically expanding the market faster than what it could be expanded. So a couple of things started happening. You had the initial folks that won the license, were in business, were making good money, and we wanted to expand. And at that expansion time, municipalities and states started releasing more licenses into the market. But then there was this whole uprising of frustration from people that were applying to licenses saying the only people getting licenses are those that are politically connected and those that already have dispensaries. And you have to give opportunity to, the smaller voices that are looking to follow the same path that kind of the early movers were able to successfully execute and navigate. So the state started offering more licenses or licensing opportunities, but they weren't giving licenses to the existing license holders. They're giving it to net new people. So you have this complete dilution in the marketplace to kind of remove large juggernauts from being established. Like they didn't want people to monopolize markets. So now you have more license, more competition, more dilution in the marketplace, and basically the gross mismanagement at a state level made it nearly impossible for anyone to be successful in these startup cannabis markets. So what we started doing is realizing, okay, this is a big issue when it comes to like actually having brick and mortar businesses doing the production and the cultivation and the actual selling. So those companies, those businesses went from being, you know, a 3, 4, 5x valuation based on annual revenue all the way down to maybe a 1x, right? Or, you know, barely even being able to get sold for what they're doing in, you know, a annual revenue. So we actually shifted into production because we realized, you know, product awareness isn't constrained by brick and mortar, right? Product awareness allows you to basically sell into any state, any dispensary.
Yeah.
And that's where we actually followed opportunity and had the ability to have an exit based on an asset that was worth more than just brick and mortar, which basically anyone that owns brick and mortar by today's standards, there's no value in it because the market is just so, you know, over leveraged with dispensaries and cultivation and production. There's way too much supply in the market without enough demand. So
Wow.
it's a long-winded way of saying, depending on where the investors in our company place their capital, was the opportunity that they ended up seeing as a return based on investing with us. But
Makes sense.
there's a lot of things that we couldn't control, and unfortunately, you know, that's sometimes how the cookie crumbles. There's always a risk.
It is.
But
It is. It's the people that have like, look, without saying it in any other way, it's the people that have the balls to actually go forward with it. And the fact that you went and executed, the biggest thing on my list of top level people is executors, people who can execute. I've met so many fucking people in my life that, you know, the people that talk such a big game and they cannot back shit up and they look like idiots. So look, for you, the fact that you've done that, I wasn't aware of that, but that excites me. This is what I'm in this for, to hear. Dude, 40 million is a whole lot of money. Do you know how many times I go to Colombia and have fun in Colombia with that kind of money?
Hopefully it's a lifetime. Yeah, with 40 million. But yeah, you never know. It depends on the extent.
Oh, seriously. So I think Flytech, you said, is the B2B tech prospect tracking company. And I believe, is that right?
Yep.
So we're going to come to that at the end because I feel that would be the growth hack that anybody who like a lot of the people that watch this are in B2B sales, enterprise sales. If this technology is something that is going to be lead forensics, Apple market, Apple Cross, Zoom Info, Apollo is what I'm using right now. There's a ton of players on the market. Be definitely interested in learning about that. So the first and second segments are on failures and learning. So Kevin, for you, obviously you've achieved some pretty significant things in your life. What is the biggest failure you ever experienced, and how has that failure shaped your character today?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, when I think of failure, I really think of opportunity, right? And I think that's the second part of your question. So, as we kind of engage in our life's journey, we often kind of come in, wide-eyed, bushy-tailed, excited about getting out there and making an impact on the world. And I think, oftentimes we kind of follow like certain trajectories and paths in life that are outlined for us from very early age. And to quote the late Steve Jobs, it's always kind of the ask why mentality, right? Like, why was I so intrigued with finance? And, my personal answer is opportunity. You see all these movies from the 1980s, Wall Street with Bud Fox, and you're like, oh my God, there's so much opportunity in this market segment. Like you get in there, you're trading, you're, working with big sums of money, but not asking why, enough, or how really is the most eye-opening opportunity. Like until you take a step away and kind of evaluate, like, where is the true market opportunity? Like 1980s, yeah, sure, finance was huge. 1990s, anything with computing, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Microsoft, early 2000s, internet, 2010s, e-commerce. Now we're kind of in this evolutionary phase of MarTech and SaaS and, kind of driving more tech-driven opportunities. And when you think about failure, I think failure sometimes is the inability to identify opportunity. And life always has kind of these 10-year cycles that, if you're in it at that moment in time, you're going to ride that wave up. But if you're kind of looking constantly back in the rear view saying, oh, finance, like there's so much money to be made there. Like, yeah, 40 years ago, right? Computing, there's so much opportunity
Yeah.
there.
No, you're right.
30 years ago, right? So,
You're right.
so I think the definition is wrong, but the passion's correct. So the definition of like what is it today? I think a lot of people look, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they bring the passion to the equation, saying this has been done before. I'm going to make my mark here and build a great career. So the passion is always correct, right? You always have that drive. You always have that motivation. You're hustling, right? You're redlining every day. But when the definition of where that opportunity exists is wrong, you're basically just running yourself into the ground. So I think, the biggest failure is not having kind of the wherewithal to see what's beyond where success has been. And I think a great analogy is, during COVID, when a lot of people were betting on GameStop, right? You had the people that were in there early and they're buying options and, longing the stock and everything. And then it hit this huge growth curve. And then all the dumb money started jumping in because they're saying, oh my God, there's so much opportunity here. But it's like, no, you missed that opportunity. And now you're just reading about the opportunity saying, oh, it happened once, it can happen again. But I think, seldom times in life, it's like right place, right time, right awareness will allow you to basically ride that growth curve. And then when you're late to the party, that's where you lose your ass, right? And just taking a step back, it's it's really identifying opportunity. And if you're not identifying opportunity and plugging yourself into the wrong place in the chronological timeline of where things are enhancing and where opportunity is living, you're basically going to be butting up against failure in perpetuity because you're chasing after things that have already been identified as opportunity, but everyone who's made money from that opportunity has already left and moved on to the next thing. So
Exactly.
that's kind of my answer. I know it's not as personal as maybe you would want it to be, but I think it's more.
No, it's whatever. I think what could add some. If we could add some color to it, is there a definitive moment, right? A definitive moment in your life where something happened and it really did change. So I'll give you an example of mine. So I had moved back to the UK in 2014. I was a security guard because that's the only job I could get. $5 £5 an hour, 15-hour shifts, 2-hour commute there and back. I just finished a 3-year bid in prison, so I was considered nothing to anybody. And I really had to work my fucking arse off to show some sort of credibility, and security was not doing it. So I started applying for jobs after I asked for a raise, and my cousin said, "I'll give you a 50p raise." 50p. That's like 50 cents on $5. So I told him, "Listen, thanks." I went and found a job, and I got into the financial markets. It was I was never able to get into the Series 7, like take the Series 7 or the 63, because of my criminal background and the shit I did fucking 15 years ago. It still haunts me to this day. So I looked at other ways of doing it, and the first person that came to my view in 2014 was Grant Cardone. I never knew about Grant before then.
Right.
This dude was just so like out there, and this mentality and personality was very, in some ways you don't like it, in other ways you do. And I started to take on that kind of that trend, that the way he acted, the way he behaved, the belief system he had. And I did it one time at a dinner when my parents came to visit me, and we were at dinner with my mum's best friend from high school and her husband. And he was speaking about something, and I said, "I'm the best. I am the best, and I know I'm the best." And he said, "No, you're just fucking arrogant. And you need to learn that very, very soon, because if you grow up in the world and you act like that in front of big time professionals, you're never going to get anywhere in life." And then another time, right, another profound moment was I was working for Vector Marketing in Paramus, and Vector Marketing was Cutco knives, right?
Yeah.
So I was selling Cutco knives.
I recall it.
And this guy, his name was...
They would knock on my parents' door all throughout high school trying to sell knives. Yeah.
They were $1,200 knives. So
Yeah.
Dennis asked me, "What's your definition of charming?" What's your definition of charming?
My definition? I think part of charming is trust. If you can trust someone and see their good and bad, and they just who they are, I would consider that to be charming.
So Dennis told me it's making people feel good about themselves, right?
Yeah.
And that was a learning. So on the failure side, it was me thinking, let me emulate a successful person's character, and maybe one day I'll be him. And it backfired on me to show me, no, you can be seen as fucking arrogant and a prick. Don't become that person. So for you, was there any definitive moment in your life, whether you were young or older, that it really did click something and you changed the way you operated from that moment? So you have to define a moment. No analogies.
Yeah. I think it's kind of a similar moment to you. And it wasn't like a particular moment in time, but I think it was an evolution. And it was based on behavior and the way people were receptive to me. I think from an early age, similar to you, it's like, you're the biggest hustler, you're the smartest guy in the room, like you're going to be a grand success. And there's a component of arrogance that actually is connected to that sort of behavior, right? And I always had that. And, at every job I had, I kind of felt like I was butting up against a wall because of like personality conflict. That person doesn't know what they're doing. That person's an idiot, right? Like it's kind of the mentality that, a winner has, but I didn't really know how to kind of isolate that and use it to my advantage. Instead of saying this person doesn't know what they're doing, it's, what can I learn from this person? How can I be a better leader or coworker or whatever to help evolve behaviors and create, better environment for growth? So there I wouldn't say there was like a specific moment in my life, but there was specific patterns that I noticed where I kept running into conflict without really accepting that, I'm the one that can control the narrative here because I'm coming in too strong. I think I know it all. I'm just like a bull in a china shop, so to speak. And there's a level of control and ability to know when to crank up the volume and know when to just kind of sit back. And that really was like more of an evolutionary type experience that I had. A lot of it happened actually when I moved out to California. When I first moved there, I was the guy from New York. I was the arrogant, Wall Street guy, giving everyone shit. You don't work hard enough. You need to step up your game.
Yeah.
But the reality is everyone has value to offer. Everybody is somebody. And I think it's like your job as kind of being that, tenacious A-type personality to be able to take a step back and identify where can opportunity actually exist within this group or this individual. And yeah, there's different ways to be aggressive with individuals to get an output that is advantageous for you or the group or whatever. And being in California, like they have a very different personality of more laid back and yeah, I'll
Yeah.
get to it. And, it drove me nuts. It was so hard to acclimate to because their focus is on quality of life, where on the East Coast it's more quantity, right? How much money do you have?
Yeah.
What job do you have?
Yeah.
California, it's
Yeah.
more about like, are you going
It
to the
is.
beach this weekend? Are you, hanging out with your friends, going on a hike? So it's
Yep.
a very different mindset, and it took me living there 5 years to really kind of adapt and create this duality and like the way I go about doing business, like backing off of being a hard ass. Because right when I got to California, maybe that was it. Maybe this answers the question. Like it took me a long time to build a group, like my core, group of friends and associates and everything, because no one wanted to be around me. I was like the crazy, work mentality,
Yep.
and I didn't accept who they were as individuals. And I think part of being able to, manage and lead, like there has to be a level of acceptance and understand, like not everyone's built the way you and I are built, but it doesn't
It's
mean
very
that they're
true.
built incorrectly. All it means is that there's, a way that we need to draw the best out of people, through leadership in order to drive towards those goals. Because some of the people that I thought were most incompetent and lazy, they were great people, like,
But in
networkers.
work, they suck.
Um, at work, they suck. They couldn't execute, but what they could do is bring the right people to the table, and then it was our job to execute. So,
That makes
you
sense.
have that
That makes
epiphany
sense.
moment of, hey, maybe the way I've been doing it isn't entirely correct. How do we round out some of these edges and become more adaptable based on the environments that we work in? And it's been very beneficial to me. We have clients across the globe, and folks that we work with in India compared to folks we work with in Brazil, compared to folks we work with in the Philippines, compared to folks that we work with on the East Coast versus West Coast in the United States. They're very different mentalities, and being able to kind of be adaptable to those mentalities, it's probably been the greatest skill set that I've developed, over the past 6 years at this point.
That's amazing. That's very interesting to hear. So, one challenge you mentioned something that can address a lot of challenges a lot of people face, and those challenges are usually diffusing difficult conversations or approaching difficult conversations. Now, one of the main reasons myself and my ex co-founder were not able to continue our business partnership was because, like you, I'm very gung ho, I'm very aggressive, I'm a dominant character, I'm a visionary, I can create ideas quickly. And he was a passive thinker. He's a he's calculated with the risks he takes. He's I would smooth but steady instead of going fast, and they both complement each other in unique ways. But whenever I was very comfortable, and I think it's because of my upbringing in New Jersey and in America. But I'm very comfortable having confrontational conversations. If
Yeah.
you've done something, I'm very comfortable saying, "Hey, look, this is bullshit." Like I wouldn't say it like that in a professional manner. This is happening. This is what we're doing. Tell me what we need to do to get this right. And it would always be, let's just do it your way then. And I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking to be a dictator. I'm looking for collaboration. And
Right.
sometimes you want to give your employees, your partners, you want to give them the ability and to trust that they can add value in their own way, so they can feel the win and they can experience what it's like to embrace their ideas being successful. So how do you diffuse those conversations when they start getting heated, client and even employee? How do you diffuse with your skill set? How do you diffuse those situations so people can do the same?
Well, just a quick point I want to mention. It's a old school saying, but it's very relevant to the conversation. And one of my previous co-founders that I worked with, he would always say this. But do you know how diamonds are made?
Yeah.
So diamonds are made through time and pressure, right?
Yeah.
They're under earth, and there's pressure, and there's time, and there's, kind of maybe a better one for our generation. Did you ever have a rock tumbler as a kid?
No, I didn't. What was that?
So a rock tumbler, you would literally find rocks in your backyard. You'd put it into this machine, and you put a little bit of grit in there, like salt, and you would just let it turn, right? It would just turn, turn, turn. As it's turning, the grit that you add in is actually polishing the stones, right? So that's another comparison of like it's time and it's friction, time and pressure, right? So nothing that's beautiful comes out without there being conversation, without there being debate, without there being, ways to think differently about it. So you always have to realize going into any business, like there's going to be a lot of pivot points. There's going to be a lot of friction along the way, a lot of, conversations that aren't the most pleasant conversations. But if both parties involved are higher minded people, they'll realize that, hey, it's not personal, Shane, right? It's not personal, Kev. Like we're doing this because the time and pressure, right? And the grit and the webbing and the friction will bring out the most beautiful output, right? So there's a component that you have to keep in mind for that. The other thing I want to mention, that's more realistic than, this arbitrary example. It might not be relevant for everyone. There's a great book. It's called Think Differently, right? And in that book, they actually talk about 4 different ways that people go about conversation, right? So you have the politician, you have the prosecutor, you have the scientist, which is the best way to think, and you have the preacher, right? So if you think about the politician, the prosecutor, and the preacher, right, they all kind of come at it in a different way that isn't really intended for the greater good of the conversation, right? A preacher is just going to rattle off the facts and say, this is why we have to do it, blah, 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 right? The politician will kind of say, yeah, I'll listen to what you have to say, but I'll manipulate it, and here's our output, right? And then we did the politician, the preacher, and the prosecutor. The prosecutor, think of people, in the court of law. They're just like drilling. You can't even get a word in because all they care about is their point getting across at all costs. But there's another way of coming to conversations or debates or whatever, which is called the scientist, the scientific way of thinking about doing it. And it's really more of like a Q&A engagement, right? So Shane, tell me why you think that this is what's best for the organization. Oh, okay, blah, 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 blah. Very top line surface area. Okay, let's get a little bit deeper, right? Let's get a little bit deeper. And those further layers that you have them bring to you to explain why they believe that this is the right decision compared to maybe what your position is, through education, asking the right questions, they start to hear themselves talk about it. They start to expand their mind and understanding of what it is that they're actually, lobbying for. And they might have that epiphany moment to say, wait a minute, maybe I was wrong, right? So I think just being very kind of strategic in the way you explain your position, inquire about their position, and kind of open up greater dialogue. Now it becomes constructive, right? Versus being political about it, being, a prosecutor about it. There's kind of more that comes out of that conversation versus just saying, my head's in the sand, this is what we're going to do. And that's where, all you have to do is throw a match on the gas can and you're going to have an explosion. So I think in general,
that is an amazing way. That's an amazing way to put it, honestly. And look, that really just dovetails right into learnings, because I think the key word for me in that is learning how to ask the right questions and then how to uncover certain layers with follow-up questions that are not, let's say, too intrusive. They're delicate, right? You approach it in the right way. So for me, questioning became one of the most valuable learnings in my career, because in America, in high school, Americans talk a lot, and I
sure
became the person. I became the person who also talked a lot. And when I came here, people are just like, my nickname became Motor Mouth because I can speak. And when it came into sales, and then there was a shift where I was selling global demand generation webinars to demand generation B2B leaders. And my initial thing was cold call, pitch, demo, send a proposal, buy, sign the contract. I'll drop my pants for you if you sign the contract. I'll sell my ass for you if you sell it, right? Everything you can do to sell the contract. And then I started Sales Driven, which was the first business. The first thing I invested in was Saturday training. I paid a full year up front for me and my business partner. And the first thing we got into was questioning. And they gave I'll actually put it in this podcast, 125 questions to ask in all stages of the sales process. That made me £500,000 in service business with just me and my business partner in the second year. And that was through questioning. So for you, what was the most profound learning experience you went through that helped you really achieve exponential growth?
Yeah. I think it's based on kind of market and capacity. In my current world that I operate in, and we touched on some of this during the conversation, it's very forward facing. And, the epiphany that I've had is, it doesn't matter what you're doing in an organization, what your title is, like everyone really is in sales at an organization. So being able to, be respectable, understand what it is that your company's objectives are, being able to care about like the betterment of the folks that we're engaging with on all levels of the organization, comes down to culture. And I think that, to your point, when the culture is just like sell, then, everyone else in the organization isn't viewing the client as, a lifelong opportunity. They're viewing it as, okay, as soon as, they sign the check, we're on to the next, right? And I think there's a lot of value in, the modern world of like doing business with people you trust, doing business with your friends, right? And that's kind of been like an old school saying for a while, but I think like really like owning that ethos and like driving more at that, it's more important than it ever has been. I mean, with introduction of all these new AI tools, like I'm getting more spam emails every day. I'm getting more LinkedIn messages every day. Like everything is just like, tenfold of what it was, because the simplicity and ability to execute on reaching out to people, it's never been easier. But then when people are reaching out to you, it's almost like you don't care about me. Like even if I told you like, my pet turtle just died, you'd be like, I don't give a shit. Like, what's it going to take me to get you to buy this stuff?
It's very true.
So there's a sense of like, build relationships on the front end, build trust. Like you and I, like we built trust 20 years ago.
Yep.
we haven't spoken in maybe 2 years at this point, and prior to that, maybe it was a decade, right? When I would see you on the bus from New York coming back to New Jersey, but but yeah, you remember that.
Yep, I do
But the
remember
thing
that.
is, like, yeah. But the thing is, like, we have already established trust. So, like, when you reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm doing this really cool thing. Like, would love for you to be part of it." Like, it's a no-brainer, right? Like, you and
Yep.
I have already done enough good in the bank where we say, "Okay, we trust each other." Like,
Yep.
there's no fast ones being pulled here. 10 years can go by, and we can pick up conversation like,
Again,
"Hey, it's the old
I mean,
days,
the next
right?"
thing.
Because
Yeah.
yeah. So I think there's, really strong value in not just viewing it based on the sale, but viewing it based on, like, hey, where are we going to be in 10 years? Maybe we do a sale today and, I get my commission, but, I'm selling you a bad bill of goods. And then we never talk again, but I got my commission, right? Or I sell
Mm.
you something good. I'm there. I help with the implementation process. Like, you have great experience. And in 10 years, you're in a startup environment with the next Uber or, Lyft or whatever,
Yeah.
and you reach
Yep.
back out to me, and now I'm getting pulled along for that opportunity because we've established that credibility with each other and that trust. So I think, just like from a differentiation standpoint, and really what drives, like, true, like, long-term opportunity, it's kind of cut against the noise, bring value instead of value add, value lead, right? Demonstrate that, like, hey, I'm here to help you, and I'll provide some freebies for you along the way. And if we don't work together, not a big deal. It might not be a good fit, but maybe you had such a good experience, someone in your network you want to make an introduction for us with, and just keep building that relationship. And next thing you know, like, we most of our business is coming in referral these days. We've only been doing it for
It's
two and a
very
half
true.
years, but yeah,
It's
I mean,
very true.
it's value first, and opportunity will follow.
All right. So would that be the line? If you were to articulate my learning or the biggest learning in one line, what you just said now, is that how you would articulate it?
Yeah, we'll run with it. I think it sounded good, right?
I think that sounded really good. So that's going to be a quote.
Yeah,
That's going on.
yeah.
That's
Well,
going on Instagram.
feel free to quote me on it.
So last part, and then we're going to go into, really interested to learn about the new business. But you've got 1 minute in front of yourself when you're 18. You're you now. You're working in the park. You see 18-year-old Kevin Love. He's sitting jamming, listening to, what did we have when we were 18? CD player.
But Blink 182, come on.
So you go sit next to him, and he says, "Who the fuck are you?" And you say, "I'm you in 10. I'm you in 20 years. Why are you here?" Well, I'm here to tell you the roadmap to success. Okay, there's a few things you're gonna do. You're gonna fuck up. I'm gonna help you avoid those. There's one thing I want you to do to get to success in half the time. What do you tell him?
One thing. Um, we don't get two or three things, only
No,
one thing.
you have to go. You only get one. The most important thing you could tell him, because if we go to 2 or 3, we'll be here all day.
Do you know what it'd be? I'm gonna squeeze in two, but one is really more of a behavioral mindset. So I don't think
Okay.
it really counts. But I think, going back to what I was saying, it's like, look, uh, we'll use a maxim, right? Remember Wayne
Okay.
Gretzky's famous maxim:
Yep.
go
Yep.
where the puck's going, don't go where it's
Yep.
been. Internalizing that and actually taking action on that, I think, is a very critical way to seize those opportunities. Don't look in the rear view, look forward, understand where the market's going, understand, that even if the market's heading in a certain direction, that you still need to be prepared for the opportunities as they come your way. So just because you know where, directional momentum is heading doesn't mean that you're in an opportunity to capitalize on it. So just staying focused, being opportunistic in, the famous maxim of go where the puck's going, don't go where it's been,
Mm-hmm.
and have patience and realize that,
Okay.
you know, although you may feel like you're prepared, chances are you're not. Chances are you're going to get beat down, but you can't let that deter you from continuing taking shots on goal, right? We'll stick with the hockey theme. So it's about going where the opportunity is going to be and taking as many shots on goal without feeling like a failure is going to define you for the
Yeah.
remainder of your career. Everyone's on different paths in life. Some people may hit insane success in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. There's really no corollary to timing and monetization and making it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, that would pretty much be my
That's a
advice. So to
beautiful.
sum it
That is
up,
a beautiful segment. Beautiful segment. So
yeah,
behavioral
don't
growth. Look forward. Have patience. And honestly, those three things. If an 18-year-old that is in high school is just about to graduate or has graduated, he might be thinking about going to college or going to start his own business. I'd recommend give Kevin Love an application, see if he's got a job for you. You'll learn much more with him. So let's wrap up
yeah.
the last bit, because the most interesting thing is always success, developments, growth hacks. And I took my biggest investment when I was a startup founder. I bootstrapped everything, was a 2-year subscription to Cognizant, which was about £48,000. And I got 10,000 credits a month. And those 10,000 credits included verified emails, direct dials, office numbers, mobile numbers, LinkedIn, Crunchbase, uh, technographics, firmographics, and I believe that was it. And then they tried to integrate sales engagement with it. So that was one. Then I got into calling technology, which was very, very just connect and sell. Orem, a lot of big players. Then business intelligence. Then we're looking at Sixth Sense, demand science, Bombora. So it's a big space. It's a huge space. So tell me, why Flytech?
Yeah.
You mentioned it a little bit, but let's hear, what is it about? What are you going to get to? What's it going to help companies do? What's the problem it solves? Let's dive deep
Yeah.
into that for the next 10-15 minutes.
Yeah. So the thing about Flytech is it's really just an evolution of both me and my business partners' best practices in the marketing space. So we're different than kind of your world on the sales side of things, where we're
Mm-hmm.
kind of more, like old school plus modern day tech enabled marketers. And one of the biggest overlaps in marketing and sales, which there's kind of always been this Chinese wall up that's divided these two departments, but now they're starting to cross pollinate with each other
Yeah.
because the market's starting to realize, well, wait a minute, like they shouldn't be in vacuums. They should be not adversarial with each other, but partnering with each other. And what we've realized through a lot of trial and error is that it's really messaging. It's like the core focus on like, what's the value to me? How much is it going to
Mm-hmm.
cost? What is this going to do for my organization? Right. So you start looking at like those very simplistic things and being able to align messaging with it. So whether you're making a cold call, sending out a cold email, or doing a digital ad campaign, that messaging component is going to be very critical in the
Mm-hmm.
success or failure of what you're doing. But then what we started realizing is, you know, on a marketing front, it's very tough, especially for B2B organizations, to drive inbound motion and actually get a successful call to action engagement. So if
Very
you're,
true.
kicking around on Facebook or LinkedIn or Google and you see an ad for sales driven and, I don't know what your cost structure is, if you have a product you sell or it's just a service, but, your potential clients aren't necessarily going to click on that, then take a call to action. What they will do is click on and go, oh, this looks interesting, kick around the website, learn a little bit more, and then drop off, right? Maybe you retarget them, bring them back to the website, same thing. But it takes so much capital and so much strategic retargeting to ultimately get those individuals to a place of saying, yeah, let's schedule a demo. Then when they schedule a demo, who knows what the sales rep is saying to them, right? So now you kind of have this like very bifurcated, broken system of like, it's going to cost so much money just to get that demo booked. And then once the demo's booked, what are we saying to them? Is there continuity in the messaging? Does it relate to what was marketed to them on the front end, what their experience on the website was? So we're kind of now sitting in the middle of saying, well, wait a minute. If we know traditional B2B sales engagements, there's a very small likelihood for folks to actually schedule a demo. What would be interesting is actually seeing who the actual individuals are that are coming to the B2B websites and what they're doing once on site. So prior to that, what we've developed, like companies have the ability to match IP addresses and say, oh, I know it's from Sales Driven. I know this person's from Flytech.
Okay.
It's not actually telling you who that individual is. What we're doing is we're actually isolating those variables and determining where those actual IP addresses are being originated from. And then we're able to reverse lookup on our master list of ICP folks that we're targeting, our prospect list, and say, okay, based on lat long, based on a Google Maps like geo lookup, we know with a 95% probability it was Shane Mahi that came to our website from Sales Driven. Now, that's very interesting because companies are doing it on a company level. They're not doing it on an individual level. We're leveraging a closed loop system where we have a database that's being looked at every time someone's landing on the site, where we're running this model to say, yeah, we know 95% that it was you that came to the website. Now, where it gets interesting, and it's kind of a combination of Hotjar, we can actually track what their page path experience was, time on page, if they clicked any buttons, things of that nature. And then we put qualifying parameters around that individual. And the qualifying parameters actually lead to a traditional MQL. So now sales teams that we're partnered with are getting this information piped directly into their CRM system. And now they have a lead list based on front end activity that they're reaching out to. So instead of doing an outbound motion saying, hey, this is our prospect list, but we don't know if these folks have ever been to our website before, if they even know who we are. We're now taking this data and saying, we know that Shane Mahi was here. Here's what he did. Now you can start your outbound motion, ping them through email, hit them up on LinkedIn, give them a phone call, or in parallel, run retargeting campaigns based on what they're doing on the website. So if you have a product suite, you saw they went to this particular component of what your overall offering is, now we can drop them into a sequence and say, retarget only on this with different messaging, different ways to basically explain the value of implementing this into their organization. And then after about a week or two of them engaging, maybe coming back to the website 2 or 3 times, now we start our outbound motion because there's a high likelihood that they actually know the organization now and actually registered with them. So that's kind of what our product is, but we're also a service-based company. So we support, ad management, ad creative, follow-up sequences, landing page optimization, all that good stuff that you typically deliver from more of a, strategic service type business, and also execution on like the ad assets and follow-ups. But we really saw a lot of value in our product. And now that's kind of what we're expanding our focus on to get our product into more hands of businesses that really focus in the B2B space.
Well, definitely, this was definitely going to sit well with a number of communities I'm in. Are you in any big communities right now, like Pavilion, Revenue Connected, Rev Genius?
Yeah.
Are you?
My business partner is kind of the community guy. So he's part of Rev Genius. He's in a lot of those communities. Speaking of which, a little factoid for you. Do you know the founder of Red Genius was actually from Wyckoff and went to Ramapo?
Jared.
Yeah.
His name's Jared Robin. Jared was
Yeah.
in. No way.
Yeah.
That. I literally just messaged him yesterday. I was messaging, hey, do you want to be on the pod? He wasn't asking me. I was like, hey, what? You ignoring me now? He said I'm on holiday, but that is fucking crazy. Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
that's insane.
Yeah.
All right, so look, these people that well, not these people. The audience that watches this is heavily engaged in sales prospecting, B2B, database management. So I have 2 or 3 questions on the product. Number one, is there an element of location-based marketing involved in there?
There isn't, because the most important thing is on the prospect level. So it doesn't matter where that prospect lives, because we're basically saying only serve ads to these people. And then based on when they're clicking through, we're able to say, we know it was this person. So it's not specific geo-targeting on the front end. Everything that takes place is on the prospect level.
So what about if a prospect is, well, can you identify whether the prospect is in the office at his office PC or at home on a regular Verizon connection?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, look, I don't know if you're up for it, but I think if people could get a first-hand view of what that looks like, I guess the first way to do it is to reach out to you. So where can they find you, Kevin?
Flytech.ai.
Okay.
FLYTECH.ai.
Beautiful. Where else can they contact you? Is there an email, LinkedIn? Do you have any other link trees?
Yeah. So we have a call to action on our website. Just schedule a call. So that would probably be the easiest. Alternatively, if someone wants to reach out directly through email, I would say our support alias, so support@flytech.ai, would also work on our end. But yeah, we typically just run through a quick demo. So I would recommend going through the website, scheduling some time. Honestly, we don't push selling of our product. We look for connection of opportunity. So it's our job to educate you to see if it's a good fit. And then it's your job to want to grow, want to implement what we have, want to drive that value in your organization. So that decision we leave up to you. But our job during those conversations is just to educate you on the software and what it could potentially do for the growth of your company.
Wow. Well, look, I think even if you're free next week or the week after, we'll do a little mini clip and maybe you can show a couple of people on here what it actually does and what it looks like. And we might even be able to do it live. So look, Kevin, this is it. We're going to wrap up the show. Again, if you like the content today, which is very juicy, like, subscribe, share the content, put the notifications on. Kevin, you can find him on LinkedIn. And we'll see you next week. Thank you again, Kevin, for being a guest on the show.